Do you miss your grandmother?
I do actually, yeah, I do miss my grandmother and my grandfather, particularly being in Windsor. For me, Windsor is her. Sometimes I'd come round and have a bit of tea with her because she had the best teas ever. So I used to get well fed.
A seemingly modest announcement emerged from Buckingham Palace on February 3rd, 2026. It contained only 2 short paragraphs, written in the restrained language the monarchy is known for. But behind the polished tone of that message, something far more powerful was unfolding. Inside royal households, legal offices, and private advisory circles across Britain, the news struck with the force of an unexpected shockwave. The statement revealed that Prince William had been named the sole beneficiary of one of the most secretive and historically significant private estates connected to the monarchy. This was not Sandringham, not Balmoral, and not Windsor Castle. Those properties were already well known to the public. What the palace referred to instead was something older, far more concealed, and carefully protected by Queen Elizabeth II for decades. When Queen Camilla and her son Tom Parker Bowles discovered what had been transferred and what had deliberately not been offered to them, the reaction inside palace corridors was immediate. Staff members later whispered that the tension was unlike anything they had seen in many years. Doors closed quietly. Conversations stopped, suddenly. It felt as though an invisible line had just been drawn across the royal landscape. The story that followed would not simply be about land or inheritance. It would become a complex narrative involving hidden estates, sealed legal clauses, quiet ambitions, and moments of silent confrontation. From the Queen's handwritten covenants to Tom Parker Bowles's stalled commercial ideas, every piece led to one unforgettable image. Camilla standing quietly, while Prince William finalised the signatures that secured the estate beyond her reach. This moment represented far more than the transfer of property. It was widely seen by insiders as Queen Elizabeth II's final strategic move, a carefully designed decision that could not be reversed once revealed. At the heart of that decision lies a property many people had never even heard of, the Cedar Estate, a place so discreetly managed that even seasoned royal observers rarely spoke about it publicly, yet its history stretches far deeper than most royal residences. To truly understand the importance of the Cedar Estate, the timeline must travel back many decades, not to modern royal politics, but to one of the most uncertain periods in British history. The year was 1944, during the darkest years of the Second World War. Britain was still fighting for survival. Cities had been bombed, the future of Europe remained unclear, and the stability of the monarchy itself was not guaranteed. In the middle of that uncertainty, King George VI quietly made a decision that would remain hidden for generations. Without ceremony or public notice, he purchased an estate hidden deep within the Chiltern Hills, a quiet landscape stretching between Oxfordshire and Buckinghamshire. There was no announcement in newspapers, no royal event celebrating the purchase. Even internal records kept the details limited. The property was known simply as the Cedar Estate, but from the very beginning its purpose involved secrecy. The estate was never placed on any public registry connected to royal holdings. There were no official tours, no press visits, and no ceremonial acknowledgements. For more than 80 years, the Cedar Estate existed almost like a shadow within the monarchy. Only a handful of senior courtiers and archivists knew of its true importance, and those who did were expected to treat the knowledge with absolute discretion. Naturally, this raises a question that historians would later ask repeatedly. Why would the royal family maintain such a secret for nearly a century? What exactly was hidden within that estate that demanded such careful protection? The answer began to emerge in internal briefing notes circulated to members of the Royal Correspondent Guild on the morning of February 3rd, 2026. The information contained in those notes left even experienced royal historians momentarily stunned. Inside the Cedar Estate stands a private chapel, modest in appearance, yet deeply symbolic. Within that chapel lies an engraved memorial vault listing members of the royal family who served during times of war. The site functions almost like a hidden place of remembrance preserved away from public attention. Beyond the chapel, underground archival chambers hold 186 oak chests filled with personal wartime letters, confidential royal communications, and diplomatic exchanges spanning decades. There are also 72 previously undisclosed royal portraits, including rare oil paintings of King George VI and Princess Margaret that have never been publicly displayed. But perhaps the most astonishing items inside the estate are the 14 sealed audio recordings reportedly capturing Queen Elizabeth II in private conversations with global leaders such as Winston Churchill, Nelson Mandela, Ronald Reagan, and Charles de Gaulle. For historians, such recordings represent an extraordinary window into the private discussions that shaped world history. One archivist who spent decades working inside the royal archives tried to summarize the importance of the collection in a single sentence. "This is not a museum," he explained. "It is the raw architecture of royal memory." In other words, the Cedar Estate does not merely store artifacts, it preserves the private voice of the monarchy itself. Yet another detail made the situation even more fascinating. Between 2017 and 2021, Prince William had been visiting the Cedar Estate quietly during private weekends. These visits were not ceremonial appearances or symbolic gestures. They were practical, hands-on experiences. William walked through the cedar groves alongside the Queen, studied wartime letters, reviewed naval dispatches, and personally helped catalogue hundreds of documents written during the Second World War. According to archivists, he even assisted technicians in maintaining the estate's climate control systems, which protect fragile historical materials from moisture damage. This level of involvement demonstrated something deeper than simple duty. It showed genuine stewardship, and Queen Elizabeth II noticed it carefully. Within the documentation of the Covenant Trust, investigators later discovered a handwritten annotation written by the Queen herself. "He will inherit more than the crown," she wrote. "He will inherit the silence that preserved it." Those words were not accidental. They signalled a deliberate choice about the future of the estate. The legal structure that protected that decision was just as remarkable as the estate itself. The Cedar Estate does not belong to the Crown Estate, nor is it tied to the Duchy of Cornwall. Instead, it exists within a private legal mechanism known as the Covenant Trust, created in 2020. Filed under Charter Seal 0142, the trust was witnessed by the Queen's personal solicitor, a constitutional advisor, and a notary connected to the Royal Archives. The trust also included a delayed activation clause, designed to trigger only after two specific events had taken place. First, the completion of the Queen's state funeral. Second, the public recognition of Prince William as the royal figure responsible for future institutional leadership. By early 2026, both conditions had been fulfilled. The palace statement therefore confirmed the transfer in clear terms. Under the terms of the sealed Covenant Trust, executed by Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II in 2020, the property known as the Cedar Estate shall pass in full and exclusive guardianship to His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales, effective immediately. Simple wording, but consequences that could not be reversed. However, this moment also marked the beginning of quiet tension within certain parts of the royal orbit. Multiple insiders later confirmed that Queen Camilla and Tom Parker Bowles had spent years exploring ways to bring the estate under their influence. Beginning in late 2024, Camilla proposed establishing a Windsor Cultural Legacy Centre on the property. The plan included culinary retreats celebrating British food traditions, literary gatherings highlighting royal women, and guided tours through the cedar groves. At first glance, the proposal appeared respectful and cultural. Yet some palace observers believed the plan carried another motivation. Private memos suggested that Tom Parker Bowles had explored commercial ideas connected to the estate. These ideas included a high-end restaurant within the hunting lodge and a luxury food brand called Royal Wild, featuring specialty cheeses, estate honey, and seasonal wines tied to the property's heritage. Then, on October 18, 2025, a leaked briefing note revealed that Tom's legal advisors had examined whether parts of the estate could be reclassified under public heritage law. If successful, that move could have weakened William's exclusive control and potentially opened the door to shared management. In November 2025, Camilla hosted a private reception near Henley-on-Thames, inviting donors, food critics, and historians. Officially, the event focused on rural sustainability. but one guest later described it differently, calling it a trial balloon for a shared stewardship model. Prince William eventually learned about the gathering. He responded calmly, declining involvement and maintaining the Queen's original vision without hesitation. 3 weeks later, the Covenant Trust was activated, but the Cedar estate was not the only royal property quietly repositioned before the Queen's passing. On January 31st, 2026, Land Registry records revealed another surprising transfer. North Acre Hall, a vast 1,200-acre estate located between Wiltshire and Berkshire. Documents dated September 8, 2022, just weeks before the Queen's passing, showed that she had reclassified the estate as a personal sovereign holding, allowing her to transfer it privately through her will. Inside Appendix R3, she wrote, "Let North Acre remain with the child who bears the burden of our future. Let it be not merely shelter, but sanctuary." The decision quietly bypassed both Prince Charles, now King Charles III, and Princess Anne. Within the inner royal circle, the reaction was subtle but immediate, like a stone dropped into still water at midnight. According to palace archivists, this marked the first personal transfer of its kind since Queen Victoria's Highland estate reallocation in 1872, executed in total secrecy. Only 2 living witnesses knew the full arrangement at the time, Lady Sarah Chatsworth and the late Queen's legal adviser, Sir Alistair Denholm. A sealed envelope had been placed quietly aside, marked with 3 words, meant for the rain that would fall long after the moment had passed. Yet while the message waited patiently in silence, Camilla had been anything but still. According to leaked memoranda from a palace aide, by the year 2023, she and her son Tom had already begun quietly promoting a plan to absorb North Acre Hall into a grand royal culinary heritage enterprise. Publicly, the concept was introduced as an elegant revival of farm-to-table tradition. Privately, however, the venture was supported by discreet investors from the United Arab Emirates and a Paris-based venture capital consortium eager to transform aristocratic nostalgia into global luxury. The blueprint was ambitious. At its centre stood a 5-star boutique hotel, accompanied by a heritage cooking academy, and a sweeping rebranding of the entire estate as a premier Windsor destination. A confidential commercial feasibility report dated July 2025 estimated that the licensing rights to North Acre Hall alone could generate more than £48 million across a decade. One anonymous insider, believed to be a consultant known only as Cordier, summed up the moment with remarkable clarity. Camilla had believed she had effectively secured the estate through influence, yet the Queen had quietly outmaneuvered her from beyond the grave. Soon afterward, whispers began to circulate through media corridors. What appeared to be casual commentary was in fact a carefully choreographed effort orchestrated by Maurice Lull, a retired public relations strategist long rumoured to manage sensitive palace narratives. By late 2025, anonymous opinion essays surfaced suggesting the monarchy had perhaps overinvested in heritage assets and might need to reconsider the balance between tradition and generational equity. In what many interpreted as a final manoeuvre, Tom allegedly attempted to secure a lease inquiry for the southern orchard tract of North Acre, describing it as underused agricultural land. The Duchy of Cornwall Legal Office rejected the request almost immediately, citing strict inheritance protections. Observers inside the palace later described Camilla's reaction in November 2025 as something far colder than anger. It was fury, not loud or theatrical, but icy and controlled, directed at the realization that she had been strategically blocked by a queen who was no longer alive to argue with. The saga of Clarence Hill Estate, however, would soon deepen the drama. This secluded property, hidden deep within the Chiltern Hills and reachable only by a narrow private road that stretched nearly 4 miles from the nearest public route, had long existed outside ordinary royal conversation. Purchased quietly in 1947 by King George VI, Clarence Hill had been designed as a discreet reserve property for direct heirs, kept deliberately distant from parliamentary oversight, Crown estate accounting, and the unpredictable tides of public opinion. In mid-January 2026, Princess Anne undertook a meticulous review of Queen Elizabeth's private correspondence inside Windsor Castle's Oak Room. Among the carefully preserved papers, she discovered a leather folio embossed with the initials WG, a reference to William George. Folded neatly inside lay a codicil unlike any the royal family had previously encountered. The message was handwritten in the Queen's unmistakable script, direct and unmistakably personal. I entrust Clarence Hill to my grandson, William, in full title and spirit, free of encumbrance, free of shadow. Let it remain outside the Crown estate, immune to politics and immune to scandal. This land is a covenant, not a commodity. The phrase immune to scandal carried unmistakable weight. Those familiar with the Queen's final years believed she had grown increasingly wary of controversies surrounding Prince Andrew, as well as the turbulent media ventures associated with Prince Harry. To Elizabeth, Clarence Hill represented something deeper than property. It was moral insulation, a sanctuary untouched by rumour, profit, or spectacle. Within that vision, the estate would belong to William and Catherine as a private compass for the dynasty's future. Camilla reportedly learned of the transfer on January 20th. According to palace sources, she summoned her legal advisers to Highgrove within hours, with Tom present for the meeting. At that moment, Tom was already struggling with reputational setbacks tied to a publishing contract that had collapsed after allegations involving the misuse of a royal crest by his culinary brand. To Camilla, Clarence Hill was not a sacred symbol. It was an opportunity. Internal correspondence later leaked revealed her enthusiasm in strikingly candid language. Imagine the launch. From the Queen's garden to yours. By January 23rd, a corporate proposal had already been drafted under a newly registered company named Hill and Crown Limited, with Tom designated as executive director. The concept envisioned a luxury agricultural hospitality brand built around themes of regenerative farming, environmental resilience, and royal sustainability. Within Camilla's broader narrative, Tom would evolve into what she reportedly called the Prince of Green Britain, an aristocratic figure rooted in modern environmental enterprise. But the plan arrived too late. The codicil had already been notarized and filed within the royal archives. Legal ownership had transferred to the Duchy of Cornwall Trust weeks earlier. Hill and Crown Limited, in effect, had missed its window before it even began. Then came January 28th, the day the entire scheme unravelled. An anonymous whistleblower, believed by some insiders to be a disillusioned palace aide, forwarded Hill and Crown's internal business presentation to the Lord Chancellor's office. The documents were explosive. They contained projected luxury valuations, marketing campaigns, and digital mock-ups of Clarence Hill itself, its historic Edwardian facade subtly overlaid with modern corporate branding. The backlash inside royal circles was swift. During a private luncheon at Windsor, meant to quietly celebrate Catherine's recovery, William confronted Camilla directly. According to those familiar with the exchange, his words were calm but devastating in their clarity. Clarence Hill does not exist to be bottled, branded, or sold. It is the last sanctuary of my grandmother's soul. I will protect it as I protect my wife and my children. Camilla left before the meal concluded. Within 48 hours, Hill and Crown Limited was dissolved, and Tom withdrew from several scheduled public appearances, citing exhaustion and stress. No official palace statement followed, but among staff and advisors, the message was unmistakable. Later, King Charles reportedly confided in Princess Anne, with a remark that quickly became something of a quiet legend within palace corridors. Elizabeth always knew who would truly hold the crown, not merely wear it. Yet the story was far from finished. The next confrontation would centre on Greystone Downs, a protected estate of more than 400 acres of ancient woodland anchored by a Tudor hunting lodge built in 1578. Tucked within the grounds stood a small stone chapel filled with 17th-century relics, objects the Queen had personally overseen during decades of conservation work. For Elizabeth, Greystone Downs represented restraint, stewardship, and continuity. Passing it to William symbolised more than inheritance. It signified responsibility. Camilla and Tom viewed the estate differently. Financial documents later recovered from a former advisor revealed a proposed luxury development model featuring eco-lodges priced at £5,000 per night, exclusive culinary gatherings hosted by Tom, and a members-only Royal Culinary Circle marketed to wealthy clients from the Gulf states and East Asia. The brand would be presented as a Windsor sanctuary, though critics noted the sanctuary was built upon someone else's legacy. Behind the scenes, Camilla's legal associate, Piers Mallory, began examining the Queen's will in search of clauses that might permit shared stewardship or collaborative heritage projects, any technical thread capable of loosening William's control. Meanwhile, Tom quietly registered another holding company in Luxembourg, Stag Crown Hospitality Limited. Princess Anne ultimately intercepted a confidential message exchanged between Camilla's legal team and a peer in the House of Lords. After reviewing it, she delivered her assessment to William in the measured tone that had long defined her reputation. "She isn't challenging the crown," Anne reportedly said. "She's challenging Mother's ethics." William responded with swift precision. On February 3rd, 2026, a sealed codicil from the Queen was officially filed in the Royal Archives. Written in 2021, it prohibited any commercial transformation or branding of Greystone Downs without William's explicit consent. The clause made Camilla's ambitions legally impossible. One palace footman later described the moment Camilla opened the document bearing the Queen's monogram. She read the page twice without speaking, the room silent except for the faint rustle of paper. Finally, she murmured 4 words that witnesses never forgot. "Even in death, she leaves me caged." William offered no reply. Instead, 2 days later, he arrived at Greystone Downs, accompanied by Catherine and their 3 children. Photographers captured the family walking quietly along the frozen edge of the estate's lake as the sun set behind the woodland hills. There was no announcement and no commentary, only a silent message delivered through presence. A family standing on their land, honouring a promise. Yet another estate remained on the board. Greenheath Estate, valued at £37 million, would soon become the next chapter in a struggle that was no longer merely about property, but about legacy, restraint, and the boundaries between heritage and ambition. Long before the truth about Greenheath fully surfaced, Camilla had already positioned herself around it. In the quiet days that followed the passing of Queen Elizabeth II, her preparations began almost immediately. She believed she understood what the sealed portion of the Queen's will meant. In her reading, Greenheath appeared to be little more than ceremonial land, perhaps an overlooked hunting parcel or an unused stretch of countryside attached to older royal grounds. That assumption, however, proved profoundly mistaken. Hidden alongside the estate was a private trust valued at £37 million, carefully constructed through decades of discreet transfers, personally approved by the Queen. This financial reserve had grown silently in the background, protected by layers of estate administration that few outside the Queen's closest advisors ever examined. For years it had existed almost invisibly, accumulating value while remaining deliberately unnoticed. When the existence of that trust finally emerged, it provoked immediate outrage from Tom Parker Bowles. He had long imagined something very different for the land. In his vision, Greenheath would become a media-driven culinary and wellness destination, an ambitious venture supported by investors from Dubai and a prominent French luxury spa group. According to palace insiders, Camilla had reassured Tom that her position within the royal household could help secure the endorsement necessary to launch such a project, particularly during periods when King Charles III remained largely withdrawn from day-to-day engagements. Plans had progressed further than most observers realised. Private promotional dinners had already been scheduled, and carefully curated invitations were being drafted for diplomats, financiers, and influential society figures. Organic wines were selected. Locally sourced produce had been arranged. Even specialty oils associated with duchy estates were earmarked for tasting events designed to impress foreign dignitaries. The machinery of the proposal was already moving. Then everything changed. On January 30th, 2026, Princess Anne, acting under the authority of the Crown Trust, finalised the transfer order that had quietly been waiting inside the Royal Archives. The documents were officially backdated to December 28th, 2025. With a single legal act, Prince William received full ownership of Green Heath. The £37 million trust moved with it. Later that evening, a royal sedan arrived at Clarence House, carrying the final paperwork. Alongside the legal documents was something no one in Camilla's circle had anticipated: a private audio recording of the Queen herself. In her own voice, recorded years earlier, she explained precisely what Green Heath was meant to become. The estate, she said, was to remain a protected legacy zone. It would host environmental education programs, child rehabilitation initiatives, and stewardship projects devoted to conservation. Its mission would be guided directly by William and Catherine, Princess of Wales. It was never meant to become a luxury destination. That same evening, Camilla called an emergency meeting at Romley House. Tom and 2 estate lawyers joined her late into the night. According to palace leaks, the discussion quickly turned toward aggressive legal strategies. Camilla reportedly considered challenging the validity of the Green Heath deed by questioning the Queen's mental clarity at the time it was signed. The argument would suggest that William and Catherine, supported by influential advisors, had somehow influenced the judgment of an elderly monarch. Such a move would not merely challenge a document, it would cast doubt on the integrity of the Queen herself. Within 48 hours, King Charles responded privately but decisively. Any attempt to undermine the will of Queen Elizabeth II, he warned, would be regarded as an attack on the Crown's memory. When fragments of that warning leaked to the Times on February 2nd, public reaction erupted. Pro-monarchy groups, constitutional scholars, and royal historians condemned the rumoured strategy as both morally reckless and legally indefensible. That same day, Catherine made a quiet visit to a children's hospice near Windsor. The moment, simple and compassionate, stood in sharp contrast to the turmoil unfolding behind palace doors. Early the next morning, at precisely 9:46 a.m. on February 3rd, Prince William arrived at the gates of Green Heath. He came alone. Wearing a simple navy coat and accompanied by only a single aide, he stepped through the frost-covered entrance without press, cameras, or ceremony. Inside the small estate office, he signed the founding charter of the Green Heath Royal Future Trust, permanently closing the land to commercial development and dedicating it to the environmental and educational mission envisioned by his grandmother. The entire signing lasted less than 20 minutes. As William stepped outside afterward, a Rolls-Royce approached the western boundary road. Camilla emerged slowly from the vehicle, sunglasses concealing her expression, a leather folder held tightly in her hands. She remained at a distance. She said nothing. She simply watched. Before her stood the realization of a vision she could neither claim nor undo. Tom Parker Bowles never arrived. By evening, Camilla cancelled a highly anticipated culinary event scheduled for the following day. Her communications office issued only a single restrained statement, affirming support for the King's reaffirmation of the late Queen's legacy. But the final chapter of the story had not yet unfolded. That chapter was Oak Ridge. On the morning of February 3rd, a sealed leather envelope bearing the cipher of Queen Elizabeth II was delivered to Prime Minister Harriet Shawcross. Inside was confirmation that Oak Ridge Estate had been transferred to Prince William. Unlike estates such as Balmoral or Sandringham, Oak Ridge existed outside Crown Estate oversight. It was a private holding protected by a unique clause within the Queen's will. The land stretched across dense woodland bordering the Thames Valley, including the ruins of a Tudor chapel hidden among ancient hunting paths, first used during the reign of King George VI. Its estimated value stood near £118 million. Yet to those who understood its meaning, the price mattered very little. Oak Ridge had long been the Queen's refuge during family conflicts, a place where she sought reflection and quiet perspective. For William, it was also the landscape of childhood memories, where he spent long summers exploring forest paths and climbing the crumbling stones of an old watchtower overlooking the valley. Inside the estate's library, a final journal entry rested beside pressed lavender leaves. The Queen had written only a few lines, but their meaning was unmistakable. Stewardship of the future must always outweigh ownership of the present. Even after the transfer, rumours circulated about a potential challenge through the Privy Purse Committee, arguing that restoration work over the decades might have involved public funds. William anticipated the possibility and ordered a full forensic audit of every restoration record dating back to 1953. But Elizabeth had already anticipated that challenge as well. Within the private will lay a clause titled Anticipatory Obstruction. It nullified any challenge brought by individuals outside the Windsor bloodline, or by those who had married into the family after 2010. When the clause was read aloud before senior royals in the green drawing room, the reaction was immediate. Silence filled the room. Camilla left abruptly. Tom reportedly lashed out at legal advisors who could offer no solution. Princess Anne remained seated throughout the reading. When it ended, she turned toward King Charles with calm certainty. I always knew this day would come. That evening, William returned to Oakridge with Catherine and their children. As the winter sun faded across the frozen landscape, young Prince George of Wales climbed the old watchtower ruins and gazed across the forests, stretching toward the horizon. After a long pause, he turned to his father and asked a question that stayed with everyone present. Will this be ours forever? William answered quietly. As long as we protect it. Not long afterward, a final letter arrived from the Queen's longtime solicitor, Sir Jonathan Arborfield. Inside was one last passage written by Elizabeth herself. If ever this estate is challenged, let it be known. Oakridge belongs not to power, but to patience. Let the one who carries the weight of the crown's future guide it forward. Signed simply, Elizabeth R. Looking back at everything that unfolded, the scale of the Queen's foresight becomes impossible to ignore. She did far more than pass property to her grandson. She constructed a legal framework designed to defend the monarchy's future against pressure, ambition, and commercial temptation. Each estate carried protections, each clause anticipated conflict. Each document answered questions that had not yet been asked. She understood that legacy is not preserved through wealth or influence alone. It survives through stewardship, through individuals willing to protect history rather than profit from it. William, in her view, embodied that principle. Since the transfers, his response has remained calm and deliberate. No public arguments, no dramatic speeches. Instead, he has allowed the structures his grandmother created to speak on his behalf, and they have spoken clearly. As morning light spreads across Windsor's frost-covered fields, William now walks land that carries not just history, but responsibility. Beside him are his children, asking questions, discovering stories, learning the quiet meaning of stewardship. The estates are secure. The covenants stand. The Queen's final strategy has already been played, but the story itself is far from over, because what matters most now is not the inheritance, but what William chooses to do with it. And if you've followed this story all the way to this moment, you already know why that future is worth watching. So if this journey through history and legacy resonated with you, feel free to share your thoughts below. Let others discover the story as well, and stay with us for the next chapter, because the legacy entrusted to William is only just beginning to unfold.